Is adopted. Moving back to guest introductions, Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, do you have some guest introductions for us? Mr. Gray, do you have guest introductions related to the resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members in the gallery, to witness the passage of ACR 37, we have guests from the Sikh Council of Central California, the Sikh Temple of Livingston, and the Sikh community leaders from my district. Please give them a warm welcome.
Members, staying with guest introductions for a moment. Ms. Gaines, you are recognized from Ms. Olson's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm very proud to introduce some constituents of mine, some future leaders in Northern California, Lake Forest fifth graders in the elementary school in El Dorado Hills. Please stand.
Members, back on the file. File items 29 through 39, pass and retain. File item 40, that's H.R. 4. Clerk will read.
House Resolution 4 by Assemblymember Campos and others relative to Black April Memorial Week.
Mr. Kansan Chu, you are recognized. You may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. On behalf of Assemblymember Campos, I rise to present H.R. 4, which I am proud to be a co-author. H.R. 4 recognized the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which will be this Thursday on April the 30th. H.R. 4 also recognized the contribution of the Vietnamese community in California and support the ongoing fight for democracy and human rights in Vietnam. I'm honored to present this resolution for the Vietnamese community of San Jose, the largest Vietnamese community in a single city in the country. For the 40 years, the Vietnamese in California have made great contribution to our economy and culture. Many have started business that help build our cities and regions, and many more have opened up to the rich culture of Vietnam. I want to recognize the success of the Vietnamese community in San Jose and around the state of California. This resolution particularly important this year because it is the 40th year since the fall of Saigon. We want to remember the sacrifice of the Vietnamese people and the American soldiers in the defense of freedom and democracy in Vietnam. As a San Jose City Council member, I saw firsthand the resilience of the Vietnamese community. Through hard work, they were able to rebuild their life in the new country and in the process of making California and America a better place for all of us. Let us memorialize their ongoing fight for democracy and human rights in Vietnam and the millions of Vietnamese and approximately 50,000 American soldiers who lost their life during the Vietnam War. Thank you. Speaker, I ask for the first row for co-authoring.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Ms. Kim, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. April 30th marks one of the darkest chapters of Vietnam. Since the fall of Saigon 40 years ago, the Vietnamese people have struggled under the yoke of communism, being denied basic human rights. Those who were able to escape have come to America and rebuilt their lives, many of them in my district, In fact, Orange County is the largest Vietnamese American community outside of Vietnam, as you may have heard over and over. I am very proud to represent many Vietnamese Americans in my district, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of you over the years. Many in my community risked their lives in pursuit of liberty and democratic ideals. I'm proud to support H.R. 4 to remember the countless lives lost during the Vietnam War era and to hope for more justice and liberty for the people of Vietnam. It is important to continue to speak out against human rights violations in Vietnam until the day we can bring freedom to Vietnamese citizens. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Ms. Garcia, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise today as the Vice Chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus to support H.R. 4. We cannot forget the bravery and sacrifice of those Americans who served during the Vietnam War and the population of new Americans, Vietnamese Americans, who came to the U.S. after the fall of Saigon. The history of women who served in the Vietnam War is often forgotten in favor of recording men's military achievements. Since our nation's beginnings, women have played an integral role in the military. Whether it has been to keep the home fries burning or to replace men's jobs when they have left in order to serve overseas, women have always played a part. But according to the Department of Defense and Veterans Administration statistics, approximately 7,500 women served on active military duty in Vietnam, the majority serving as nurses. But independent surveys puts the number even higher, showing between 33,000 and 55,000 women who were in Vietnam for civilian and non-civilian services. Members, I give you this information to show you the importance of women who served and the challenges they faced when returning home. Despite these high numbers of women who served, women were treated as second-class soldiers. The women soldier role was underappreciated, and their service and sacrifice was seen as a helpmate. The lines of combat have long been blurred, and as we stand to recognize the service of American soldiers in Vietnam, let us also remember that came in many colors, and there were both men and women. The fall of Saigon was a call to action and a decry to all of the atrocities of the communist government. But as refugees left their home countries, many immigrated to our homeland and bettered our way of life. The contributions of Vietnamese Americans to recent decades have been profound, and the enrichment continues with women like news anchor Betty and Lena Nguyen, director and producer Lin Ga, fashion designer Chloe Pao, Jun Liu, an astronomer and author Amy Fan. All of these women and their families fled with the fall of Saigon and have made their way to America and have contributed to the great tapestry that we have in this country. Members, I encourage all of you to vote aye for H.R. 4 to memorialize the sacrifice of our veterans and those who came to our shores because of the fall of Saigon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Patterson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm going to just be very, very brief on this and ask for your support for H.R. 4 on behalf of Brian James Patterson. He is our oldest son. He's 42 years of age. He was on the baby lift from Vietnam. We adopted him, and we are proud parents of B.J. Patterson. And so this is something very personal and dear to us, and urge your support for H.R. 4.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Mr. McCarty, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in support of this measure. In 2009, I had the pleasure as a local city council member to bring a Little Saigon district to Sacramento, California. Certainly not Santa Clara, Orange County by its population and numbers, but a significant population here nonetheless in Sacramento. And this is a bittersweet day this Thursday for the community, marking the proud history of the individuals who fled Saigon on that day, but also remembering the great contributions we have here in California and cities like Sacramento. Thank you.
Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of House Resolution 4. Last week, we unanimously passed Senate Concurrent Resolution SCR 29, which I was proud to joint author, designating the month of April as Black April Memorial Month to remember the lives lost during the Vietnam War. Just as I was honored to join with Senator Janet Wen to recognize the hundreds of thousands of Vietnam War casualties in the fight against communism, I am equally honored today to join Assemblywoman Campos and Chu to remember the struggles of countless Vietnamese refugees. Orange County's Little Saigon is the oldest and largest in the nation, home to over 189,000 Vietnamese Americans, and this region constitutes the largest Vietnamese American population outside of Vietnam. In my district, the 72nd, Westminster and Garden Grove rank as the highest concentration of Vietnamese Americans of any city in the United States, of any cities in the United States. And Bolsa Avenue is world-renowned as a center of Vietnamese American business and culture. My district's Little Saigon serves as a powerful symbol of the Vietnamese people's resilience and success in their pursuit of the American dream. The Vietnamese American community is one of the foundations of our great state. It's emblematic of our rich diversity, and we cannot forget the sacrifices made both then and now in the continuing fight for a free Vietnam. Let us not forget the sacrifices of our brave Vietnamese American brethren who fought, who risked their lives, who sacrificed their lives for freedom and democracy, and let us always work toward a free Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Seeing no further discussion or debate on this item, Mr. Chu, you may close.
Thank you very much. I would like to open the first row for co-authoring, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
And Mr. Chu, I'm sorry I missed that. You would like co-authors on this?
Yes, I'd like to open the first row for co-authoring.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chu's asking the first row will be open for co-authors. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who wish to vote. Adding as co-authors on H.R. 4. Members, this is for co-authors on H.R. 4. There are 76 co-authors added. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Chu, moving back to guest introductions, let me formally recognize you for your guest introductions related to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I ask that you give my guest from Assembly Member Nora Campos' district and my district a warm welcome. They are here today in the rear of the chamber in celebration of your approval of H.R. 4. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tam Nguyen, the newly elected San Jose City Council member, whose district include Little Saigon in San Jose. And also with Honorable Tam Nguyen are Mr. Barry Doe of the Little Saigon Foundation and Mr. Har Tui from the Regional and Popular Foundation. Please also recognize the guests in the gallery, which are standing on the side, that are from Campos' district and my district, to come here to thank Assembly Member Campos and to celebrate the passing of H.R. 4. Thank you very much.
Okay, members, we are back on the file. File item 41, AB 422. That's passed and retained. File item 42, AB 560. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 560 by Assemblymember Gomez, an act relating to civil actions.
Mr. Gomez, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, today I'm presenting AB 560, which will ensure children are treated impartially when seeking recovery. This bill will assert that a child's immigration status will not be taken into account when the child is seeking liability or remedy in a lawsuit. No child should be discriminated against because of their immigration status, and this bill expands on a previous bill passed several years ago. An undocumented child in our state deserves the same protections as any other child. In essence, a child is a child. California has led the way for the rights of undocumented children, and we must continue to do so with the passage of AB 560. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to rise in opposition to this bill because it doesn't fix what it purports to fix. There is no discrimination involved, and this is a solution in search of a real problem. There is no problem here. Let me just explain briefly. The issue is in litigation, when it comes time after the case has been adjudicated for the judge or the jury to determine the damages and the amount the plaintiff is to get back, to, in fact, come up with the right number that will restore the plaintiff to the position they would have been in but for the problem. That's what remedies are all about, and this bill puts this legislature's thumb on the scale of remedies. It doesn't fix any discrimination. It doesn't change how we would treat these plaintiffs, these children, in litigation. It doesn't affect their ability to recover actual damages. It doesn't affect their ability to recover punitive damages if those are appropriate. All it does is say the court's determination of what this child might or might not earn in his or her lifetime is going to ignore reality. We don't do that in any other area of the law. There's no reason to do that in this area of the law. The courts have, for hundreds of years in our legal tradition, been able to fashion rules to come up with real remedies in addition to the other damages that are suffered. The bill doesn't get to any of those. All it gets to is this narrow classification, and all it does is tell the judges and the juries, ignore reality and let's kick up the amount of damages. Curiously, who's bringing this? Really not so much our immigrant rights community. This is another trial lawyer bill. This is another bill that puts money into the pockets of the trial lawyers, claiming fairness, but it's putting our thumb on the scale of fairness. It's taking fairness away from the system. It's taking fairness away from defendants. It's taking fairness away, and that's the wrong thing for this legislature to be doing. Let's not game the system further to line the lawyers' pockets. This is an easy no, and I urge your no vote.
See no further discussion or debate on this item. Mr. Gomez, you may close.
Thank you so much. So several years ago, we actually did pass a bill that stated that the immigrant status shouldn't be taken into account when determining liability or remedy of adults. That left out children. So we're expanding that to include children of immigrants, the children who basically their immigration status shouldn't be taken into account. That's all we're doing is expanding it. And no matter how emphatically you state something, it doesn't make it correct. The bill is actually sponsored by and supported by MALDEF. The consumer attorneys are not involved in this bill whatsoever. Actually, I had to kind of work with them to get out of the way so I can move this bill forward, and which we actually ended up doing. And that's how it got passed out of the Judiciary Committee. This was not a consumer attorney bill. This was only a bill for the Mexican American Legal and Education Defense Fund. So I greatly appreciate my colleagues' concerns, but those concerns are misplaced. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 53, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 43, AB 459. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 459 by Assemblymember Daley, an act relating to insurance.
Mr. Daley, you may open.
Speaker and members, this bill allows the owner of a life insurance policy to seek declaratory relief if there is a question of whether the original purchaser had a valid insurable interest in the life of the insured. In order to qualify for this relief, the policy must have been sold prior to 2010 and have a death benefit of at least $1 million. This bill is the result of negotiations between the Institutional Longevity Markets Association and the Association of California Life and Health Insurance Companies. It resolves ongoing disputes between life insurers and the investors who purchased such life insurance policies issued before our state laws regarding insurable interest were changed in 2010. I respectfully request an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daley. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, no 0. Measure passes. File items 44 through 47 pass and retain. Moving up to file item 48, that's AB 520. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 520 by Assemblymember Levine and others, an act relating to apprenticeship.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. AB 520 requires the Director of Industrial Relations to include proposed or adopted changes to apprenticeship standards in their annual report to the legislature. Current law requires the Director to submit an annual report. This report includes data and statistical information designed to improve apprenticeship completion rates. This bill will increase dialogue and communication between the legislature and the department, and in doing so, advance apprenticeship programs. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 54, no 0. Measure passes. File items 49 and 50 pass and retain. File item 51, that's AB 653. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 653 by Assemblymember Levine, an act relating to post-secondary education.
Mr. Levine, you may again open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 653 seeks to ensure that successful collaboration among California's institutions of higher education continues into the future as new technologies are planned and implemented. This bill would require the CSU, UC, and community colleges to coordinate their efforts when investing in system-wide technology to prioritize that student success across segments is the number one priority. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Seeing no discussion on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Measure passes. File item 52, AB 655. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 655 by Assemblymember Quirk, an act relating to rendering and making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Quirk, you may open.
Thank you, Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 655, which has received unanimous support in both Agriculture and Appropriations Committees. AB 655 does two things. First, it extends the sunset date for the transporters of inedible kitchen grease program administered by the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Second, it increases the transporter's minimum enforcement fee from $300 to $350 per vehicle. Finally, AB 655 is industry supported and has no opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Quirk. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 71, no 0. Measure passes. File item 53, AB 703. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 703 by Assemblymember Bloom, an act relating to juveniles.
Mr. Bloom, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I'm presenting this bill which sets forth the basic duties of Juvenile Delinquency Defense Counsel with respect to representing the expressed interests of clients, confidentiality and investigation of the case, the use of experts, and maintenance of an ongoing relationship with their clients. AB 703 also requires the Judicial Council to establish minimum hours of training. Competent representation in juvenile proceedings is important to youthful clients and their families, the juvenile justice system, and the community at large. Competent representation is needed to preserve the integrity of our justice system, prevent wrongful convictions, and reduce unnecessary incarceration. The adequacy of delinquency representation has a direct impact on costs for unnecessary incarcerations, court challenges, and ultimately whether our young people will succeed in the community. And I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Seeing no discussion or debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 75, no 0. Measure passes. File item 54, pass and retain. File item 55, AB 852. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 852 by Assemblymember Burke and others, an act relating to public works.
Ms. Burke, you may open.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Assembly Bill 852 expands the definition of public works to include construction, alteration, demolition, installation, or repair work on a general acute hospital project that is paid for using tax-exempt conduit revenue bonds issued on or before January 1st, 2016. A conduit revenue bond is a financial method by which a public entity issues a bond for a private development project. As a result of being issued through a public entity, interest payments on the bond will be tax exempt, and the public ends up subsidizing these projects due to foregone tax revenues. The costs associated with this bill will come from the State Public Work Enforcement Fund, which was created last year to fund the Compliance Monitor Unit in order to monitor and enforce prevailing wage requirements on public work projects. AB 852 will ensure that workers on these publicly subsidized projects are paid a livable wage and that the most skilled and qualified workers are building these complex medical facilities. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Question for the author.
Without objection.
Since this is your first bill and it's on prevailing wage, I find that it's an interesting fact that you prevailed in following the steps of your mother, Yvonne, into the State Assembly. In fact, I think it's the first mother and daughter duo ever to come to the State Assembly. So in honor of that fact, would you accept a friendly amendment to call this the Great Daughters, Awesome Moms Prevailing Wage Bill?
I accept your amendment.
Mr. Speaker?
I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Since she accepted our amendments, I ask the bill be put to print and be put back on file.
Mr. Speaker, sorry. What can I say to take it back?
Members,
Mr. Speaker,
members,
Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Burke, Ms. Burke,
I
may I?
address you directly.
May I, Ms.
Not
Burke?
take the amendment, yes.
The amendments are out of order?
Yes.
They were not at the desk prior to the session?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
They were not in Leg Council form.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Those amendments cannot be accepted.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also would like to remind my colleague from Salinas that this is actually not my first bill. This is my third measure on the floor, but thank you for asking for the amendment.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Please state your point of order.
Resolutions do not count as your first bill. There are resolutions to my freshman member. But I got another one.
Mr. Alejo.
Oh, keep on.
Last question, Mr. Speaker. If you will not accept my First Amendment, I ask that the next one, when it goes to committee, to the Senate, that it be amended to be called the Autumn is the New Spring Prevailing Wage Bill Act.
Mr. Speaker, I will address his question, and for my very, very short colleague from Salinas, we will not be accepting your amendment. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bloom, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, question of the author.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noticed when you rose to speak about this bill, you were laughing. you're not laughing anymore, are you?
Actually, I think it is pretty funny.
Mr. Jones Sawyer, you are recognized.
Ms. Berg, I read through your bill, and it's probably one of the best bills I've ever seen from a freshman member. And I only really have one question. I know your mother has served in this House, as been mentioned before. I know she served in Congress and on the Board of Supervisors in Los Angeles. And I just have one question, since this is such a well-crafted bill.
Without objection.
That is, did your mommy help you with this?
Well, Mr. Reginald Jones Byron Sawyer,
Jones Sawyer.
Senior, sorry. My mom did teach me one thing. She did not help me with this bill, but she taught me to treat my elders with respect. So you may sit down, sir.
Ooh.
Shall we take that as your close, Ms. Berg?
You may, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 50, noes 25. Measure passes.